In today's big data world, sage advice like follow your intuition too often gets criticized within business settings. Yet, having deep domain expertise can improve your intuition breadth and depth, allowing your brain to unlock the powers of pattern matching and the ability to more consistently predict what will happen next. And as you'll hear in this episode, I didn't need to question how I came to a particular conclusion the first time seeing the early concept for Salude. I just knew the hydration brand had winner written all over it. But maybe I'm giving my gut too much credit and overlooking my 12 plus year history with Salude's co founder, Tyler McCann. And while us two outsiders didn't spend too much time together at MusclePharm, the athletes company did form the foundation for our supplement industry knowledge. But beyond briefly talking through some of the most interesting moments from MusclePharm, Tyler and I discussed some of the great, bad, or ugly strategic lessons that became iterative direct applications within the commercialization of Salude. Moreover, we talked through some of the drivers of demand and categorical trends over the last decade that created massive opportunities within the supplement industry, many of which helped Salude become a hypergrowth brand. Also, Tyler and I cover the strategic approach at Salude, including its authentic cultural branding strategy, focused product portfolio, sales channel strategy, and how it has built strong initial brand awareness through scrappy partnerships, leaving many untapped, significant large deals until the timing is right. Finally, I provide Tyler my grand vision and goal for Salude that I think even surprised him a bit. But these are just some of the interesting topics we chatted about in this episode. So without further delay, here is the recent conversation I had with my good friend, Tyler McCann. Tyler, just wanted to thank you for taking some time out of your schedule. This is a long time coming because I think I asked at a good time, but a time where you wanted to save this for my fellow Josh and his podcast to make sure you guys told the story around that anniversary. Because I was like, let's jump on. I think it's time. I see the growth rate. I see the activity. I see all the stuff going on here. And then you stalled me out for a little bit.
Yeah, I wanted to build the resume, so to say. And now we're 3 years in, a little over 3 years, and I feel like maybe it can bring some value to your audience.
I feel like I always have like these connections with people that I bring on that I don't think anybody knows audience wise or whatever. Maybe somebody knows this between us, but we crossed paths at a pretty interesting time because it was around the time when I was leaving MusclePharm and you became one of the interns, I think, and you were still in college in the sports science center. I don't remember what we called it, but you came in and I remember like within a few weeks, like, you were getting the tour and you came in and we were chatting for a little bit and then I was gone. And then, you stuck around, but like we have that connection from the athletes company, but you spent, I think you said 8 years, which is kind of crazy to think about that length of time because I spent less than 2 years and I thought, man, I got burnt out. Like, and it was a different time frame because like, obviously when I was there, the team was super tiny and we were like hanging on for dear life in terms of the growth. And I was working way too many hours and spending too much time on the road and all those number of different things. But like, I think 8 years sounds insane to be at MusclePharm during two completely different eras, CEO kind of phases. Like you talk about adaptability that you had to have because those two, two leaders were at least from my perspective, completely different.
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, you're right. I started as an unpaid intern. The whole reason I got into this industry is that I saw a tweet from Dr. Kim, for those that may know Dr. Mike Kim. And it was basically advertising internships at MusclePharm. Threw my hat into the ring going into my senior year of college. And that is honestly, if not for that action, I can say I probably wouldn't be here today running a supplement brand. Wild to think that I started as an unpaid intern, and as you said, I stayed on for 8 years. That included a relocation to Los Angeles. By the time I left, I was the main point of contact at our biggest account, which was Costco. So wild just series of events going from not doing super meaningful work to eventually having done like most of the roles in the business. And truly, like there's moments now that I'm doing things for Salude that all along the way there was really valuable learnings, both from Brad's era as well as Ryan's era, and I've been able to like take from that and take the good, try to learn from the bad, and that's really again why Salude exists today in a lot of ways.
When you mention the kind of the moment or like the evolution, I'm thinking about a arguably like one of my more memorable stories. I was hired to do something completely different, like non-front facing,
Hmm.
non-consumer, like a customer oriented, nothing like that. I was there to kind of like crunch numbers and do strategy and whatever. And within a matter of, I can't remember if it was the first 60 or 90 days, we had a kind of a crazy like thing that happened where the UFC, they were in Denver. We had Rampage versus John Jones, and one of our longstanding employees was super close with the John Jones team, even though we had
Hmm.
Rampage kind of living in the facility. And he was running international sales and he was running a bunch of like other kind of things. And he got caught up into some things and like they had to fire him because he was telling them information to
Hmm.
John Jones's camp during this whole like thing, and it even hit like I think ESPN. It was like this crazy kind of time. But during the Olympia, which was like 60 or 90 days into my employment there, you know, Brad's. I think it was like when we were setting up, Brad walks over to me and goes, "Hey, I need you to take all the meetings for all of our international distributors." And again, this is the time when MusclePharm was like just hitting its stride. The new, you know, packaging, lime green, kind of that whole feel there. And like I had a whole book of these international distributors from every country possible. I had never done anything like that in my
Hmm.
life, and they just like threw me right into like the deep end and said like, "Good luck, figure it out, you'll be fine," or whatever. And I remember like, so this is what Muscle Farm's going to be like. Like that was my, you know,
Yeah.
total like, you know, I should have known from that point on every day was going to be like that.
Yeah, if I learned anything from that, it's that like, if you were get into a unique position like that where a brand is just on a rocket ship and you're willing to work hard, you might have got in for one thing, but they need you somewhere else. You could grow pretty fast. And like now even that's in the case of Salud, we're growing pretty fast as well. And like I've tried to tell some of our younger employees like, hey, we might have hired you to come in and do this specific role. But for those that really want to climb the ranks, and yourself being one of them back in the MusclePharm days. I feel like I did that. There's a handful of others in the industry now at some pretty large brands. Like we took advantage of that opportunity, right? And I'm sure Brad probably didn't envision you taking on all those international accounts, but it was just a next man up mentality. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, been the fun part of working in this industry. I've heard people say like, it's kind of like dog years, if you're working at such a fast growing supplement brand, like 1 year at Muscle Farm during that time was like 5 years at another company. And I definitely see some truth in that.
I don't talk about it too often. Every once in a while, I'll meet somebody new or whatever, and they'll ask me about it because maybe they know my history. Because I think it was such a fascinating, you know, especially a business case now because we get to see it in hindsight. But like even at the time, especially the kind of the veterans, like they are so curious about a lot of
Hmm.
that era because it was one of the unique stories within a space that was still new and nascent, and like there wasn't a lot of those like that you could pick out and say, oh, that had a special place or moment within the era. But like I used to tell people, like the amount of decisions and the speed of the decisions that need to be made was something that you couldn't ever replicate, you know, because of just the, like you
Hmm.
mentioned, the 5 years into one type of a scenario. Like, you know, I felt like that time was, you know, the real world MBA to the paper MBA that I had was one of
Hmm.
those things where like I actually got to like get out of the, you know, what does the book say, and then get into like
Uh-huh.
what's the reality of what the decisions you're making, and good, bad, or ugly. Like you're going to either learn a lesson or you're going to see that some feedback loop that you're like, wow, this really worked, and you kind of try to feed it some more because it was really, again, I know the industry keeps changing and things keep moving,
Hmm.
and you know we're constantly, I think, in this flux of like new stuff happening. But like during that time, I felt like there was, you know, this was the introduction of like social media and like all these things that like the tools that today we take for granted, those were just like super new, that like we had people just like diving into like weird aspects of like these marketing levers that like just didn't exist. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, there's, such a, I guess I look at it with like rose colored glasses over, looking at even the negative things, because to me, even, and I'm first to admit, like, we made a shit ton of mistakes. Those, I think, were the fundamental building blocks of my real understanding of the industry, the bad stuff, not the good stuff. It was great that we did all those strong things that grew revenue, but I guess I got more value from the mistakes we made, because those were like these fundamental things that, like, you don't make them again. You go like, oh, I see them. I see that I don't want to have that happen. Even if you see like it from a different angle, like you could see how people make those mistakes again, still in this industry today. It's like a lot of those patterns are going to go on forever. And at least getting that experience, you go, okay, I could see it. And I don't, have this newness to those mistakes. It's like, so in my world, it's super helpful, because as I'm, trying to, coach, mentor, consult with companies, it's like a lot of those bad experiences are actually, super valuable.
Yeah, totally agreed. I would say of the 8 years I was there, I probably learned more in the last, handful when it was really declining. Partially just because, again, it's next man up mentality. You're having to work on more and more things, less people around you. Again, you're learning from big mistakes. The early days there, I definitely took some learnings as well, specifically on like what went into building such a big and powerful brand, attention to detail. One thing that was really awesome in the early days was just the culture that we were a part of. The sad thing now, I mentioned this to you before this recording, is that a lot of younger employees or people don't really, unless they're the OGs or have been following the supplement industry around our age, everyone our age would know MusclePharm, but now very few people know it, which is crazy to think that MusclePharm could have been, as big, at least as big as someone like Nutrabolt, if they would have done things differently. And now they're pretty much non-existent, and so much so that, like, if you mention the name MusclePharm, it could be jarring to people just because it sounds so aggressive. So yeah, it was a crazy ride. 100% everything I'm doing now is to thank for that, again, just that action of responding to a tweet, getting involved there. There's certainly been a lot of resources and different people along the way that have really enabled this business, Salude, to get started.
Yeah, I also think, talking about the length of time that you've been in the space now, and then I can add, another handful or more years as well, is that, and you look at the timing of Salude, and we'll get into some of the details, but I think there's a lot of like the evolution of the, quote unquote supplement industry that really has helped like a brand like yours be successful. Because you think about, again, going back to like when we initially met at MusclePharm, like those products were only really sold in a GNC or a vitamin shop or, these specialty retailers. You also had them very much like concentrated with a certain type of customer. It was very much like performance or sport reasons why you were taking these products. Like that's how people perceive those products. And then, through the, I guess the proliferation of the industry, the dissemination of the, like all these things, like now products are being sold in large retail in both, extensive breadth and kind of depth in terms of the merchandising. You have consumers now today that like realize that these products can be taken for a number of different reasons. Like the democratization of the category is so real. So then, and there's also like a lot of those audience-based, social, we talked about like the social media, all those things have like taken on its role where like these things now, if you were to create Salude back in 2011 or 2012, who knows what would have happened, but like the odds have been probably much worse because of like needing to have a lot of these things go on over the last decade, where now it's like brands like Salude can be not only launched within, but like it has a huge amount of a tailwind that blows them in a certain way. And the expectation is so much higher than back in the MusclePharm days or whatever, because those really were stuck in a certain controlled sales channels, controlled customers. Like, the biggest brands back then are laughable, I guess, in the size today. I don't know. It's just kind of crazy. Like a lot of times timing goes into some of these things.
100%. Yeah. And I guess for those that aren't familiar with Salude, I'm one of the co-founders. My other co-founder, Josh Leva, is an Instagram YouTuber has a large audience. He has a big podcast. So now it's very much in line with a lot of the brands that are coming to market now that are partnered with, are owned by a creator, because that really does allow you to accelerate your growth so much faster. When you started at MusclePharm, it was truly just like a GNC muscle magazine, Olympia bodybuilding expo, very niche style industry. I would say MusclePharm made that a bit more mainstream when they tried to reach out to, professional athletes, people such as Tiger Woods, who you wouldn't really expect to be repping a protein powder or products commonly found at GNC. Then I view this era sort of shifting more to like the influencer model. A brand that comes to mind for me in the supplement space was Shreds, which I know you know Shreds. They really started getting these non-celebrity influencers promoting them. Gymshark's an amazing example of that as well, that were paying for posts. The first time that I recall personally seeing the influencer as an owner model was specifically probably 3D energy drinks, which is Congo brand's brand, or more people were probably familiar with Alani Nu. They had partnered with an influencer, a YouTuber, Katie Hearn. That creator really, like, the amount that they were able to grow just based on the loyalness of their audience. I saw this from afar working at MusclePharm, especially as we were declining, getting having a hard time getting people to promote the product. It was really apparent to me that, wow, that if you build a great product that's on trend around a creator's audience, that creator has the ability to like really truly influence people, that could be a really viable business model. And now it's like, I feel like most of the success brands we're seeing, not only in supplements, but just mainstream CPG, there's a lot of huge celebrities attaching themselves to products. And it doesn't always work, but there's some huge success stories out there. One that comes to mind for me would be like Conor McGregor, right? In a couple of years, he's built something pretty massive with the whiskey company. The Rock is one. Obviously, Prime, Congo Brands is one as well.
Yeah, it's that whole kind of creator package goods, thing. It's interesting because, when you are able to hack culture or hack the algorithms or whatever it is, like, and I use that word lovingly in the sense like it's extremely hard to be able to hold people's attention and be able to constantly do that. And then if you can do that, you have such a baked in audience that then if you can align that audience's wants and needs to the creators kind of, aesthetic and what they're about and what they can kind of bring to life. Like when you can hit on that great product and kind of the right product and kind of the right audience, like you end up doing amazing things. Like it's kind of crazy. And I want to talk about just the conceptualization of kind of Salude, because how did you and Josh get met? Was this something that like Josh had in the back of his mind in terms of like wanting to do, something, and then you were like, hey, because I know this side in and out, like I'm going to take your vision and like, let's shift it into this product or whatever it was that like ultimately made it super aligned. Like I'm sure there was a little bit of like, either he had the idea, you had whatever it was, like you guys kind of made some soup together and it came together like really good. But I'm just curious to see like, how you guys met, how the idea came to life.
The stars really aligned during COVID. Both of us were at a point in our career. Myself being at MusclePharm, I could kind of tell that was a bit of a sinking ship. I thought, after 8 years of working there, I had gotten enough of skills and insights to potentially do my own thing. I knew that there was this path to partnering with creators. I live in LA. There's a lot of YouTubers and creators and people around this area. So very fortuitously, I met Josh via a mutual friend at a gym during COVID. We were all kind of working out together. It didn't happen to be like the first day we saw each other, we're like, hey, we're going to partner on a business. But after like, a couple months of hanging out, working out, there was like a day where just the two of us showed up. The other guys we were with weren't there. And Josh, I got to learn a little more about him. He has a big audience. Like I said, YouTube in particular tends to be the influencers that can really move units. And so he expressed to me that he had always wanted to do a product. Josh is first generation Mexican American, so the whole brand positioning Salude is based around his heritage. And he kind of shared with me like, hey, I think there's a big opportunity here to do flavors and branding and products that are, specific to my culture. And I knew as well that the hydration category was something that was on the rise. MusclePharm was sold in Costco across the globe, and Liquid IV kind of made a name for themselves in Costco. So Josh originally, he's big in the gym. He likes to work out a lot. He wanted to do something more along the MusclePharm sports nutrition route, and I steered us a little more towards something that could be maybe more approachable for all. Yeah, his audience is mostly female as well, so that was again like something that made sense to potentially steer clear of maybe the scariness of sports nutrition and something that could be a bit more mainstream. But from there, yeah, like I knew the category was ripe, and but I took an insight of like, how could we improve upon Liquid IV? One of our main differentiators is that we have 1 gram of sugar, which we've really had some wins on, leaning into that messaging. The positioning with Josh's heritage, as I said, we have some really unique flavors that other brands don't offer. And then additionally, because this sort of originated during COVID, we leaned into, for our hero SKU, some immunity claims that have been meaningful and a separator for us.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the timing and everything, thinking back to the super early conversations that you and I had about, creating the brand, I was just coming off this stage where we were building our home and we were kind of doing the Airbnb kind of 1 month at a time type of situations. Like the timing was like, I was just done living like 4 weeks in Mexico and going and grocery shopping and doing those types of things and getting flavor kind of enhancer, water, liquid enhancers, like the certain things. All of a sudden you are showing me this thing and I'm like, this is exactly like the functional aspect of that, with the, on culture flavors, everything was making sense. I was looking at this thing and I've always been a big proponent in terms of, not so much like, niching yourself down too much, but like making sure that you are speaking authentically to an audience and making sure that you know who you are and most importantly, who you aren't. Because I feel like a lot of the brands today, they try to go too wide too quickly and they get themselves in trouble. If that's, if that product is that, who they're speaking to customer wise, whatever it is, like it seems like people don't realize to get depth in terms of what you're doing before you start to get out there. And I just remember like some of those early, conversations and things like that. And like instantly I got it. I was like, this is going to do great. Like as long as you, execute on some of the stuff on the back end, I think the front end obvious stuff was going to just work. Like I think it was just like, it just made sense. Like anybody that pays attention to, kind of consumer behavior, but just general flows of humans, like there's such a huge population in Hispanic population in the United States. I think over the last 50 years, it's like 6x. And then they're expecting it to double again in the next whatever. But like, it's around 20% of Americans at this point are of some, kind of Hispanic background. And you look back into like general CPG, not only, I think people could see examples today, but you think back a few years ago and you think back even further than that, there wasn't a lot of brands that were speaking to that, and definitely not supplement brands. Like there was very few that ever kind of went across as like, we're taking a kind of a cultural positioning or, whatever that was. It was more just like, hey, we sell pre-workouts in blue raspberry and, whatever it is. And everybody can take it because everybody loves blue raspberry. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that like have no idea what that is and like has no connection to them, or these nostalgic things are not connected to their heritage, where then the opportunity is, can you do that in a way that actually speaks to them? And now there's been some of those kind of have popped up and you're like, so obvious, but in hindsight, it really wasn't.
Yeah, and even in the category as well, like if you look at the brands that are on the shelf, they're all tending to be like very similarly, like, they're the same color blue, Liquid IV, they have the same 5 flavors. In a lot of the retailer meetings we've been in, they're telling us like, we don't need another lemon lime spin-off of Liquid IV with 2x electrolytes. Like, I don't really think that like, you know, a couple minor formula changes are going to significantly move the needle. But in our case, like our packaging is really with the skull on the front. It's different, which by the way was not always like an obvious thing for us. Like Josh and I, and specifically Josh, obviously being Mexican American himself, understood like the importance of the skull branding to the culture. Um, we were pretty convicted in it, but very early on, we had some feedback from people telling us that like, you know, this doesn't look like a health product. Maybe you should tone it down, kind of steering us back towards category norms. And I could say that it's been honestly one of our biggest advantages, even in just running digital ads, right? You want something that jumps off the page, catches people's eye. You know, like another brand that's uses a skull as well, that's done a pretty good job of this is Liquid Death. So you need to have things that differentiate yourself in the form of flavors, packaging, positioning, all of these things like get retailers excited from what they've, you know, been doing for many years.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, you were leaning into authenticity. And when I think, back to if that's where you're anchored to, and then it's when you have some of those like non-consensus, like, and have conviction early in some of those things, that like where you get the most arbitrage on some of these things, because most people, like you said, are going to go back into the norm. They're going to go back into the status quo. They're going to just, you know what, that's too scary or too risky or whatever that is. And instead of saying
Uh-huh.
like, I trust my gut, I trust where this is going, and then let's go full force into it, which I think is, a little bit of a good segue. I remember a
Mm-hmm.
conversation in the first year that you guys were, maybe it was at Supply
Mm-hmm.
Side West. I can't remember where we were at, but we were having a
Mm-hmm.
conversation, and I made a comment or something around how you at least are thinking about one. You have this like cultural
Mm-hmm.
marketing or positioned brand, and Josh, being able to like be out in front of the brand and speak authentically, and then you're kind of in the background and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like should I put my hand up and speak loudly? Can I? Do I have a
Uh-huh.
voice here? And I think even to like some of my clients over times that like have built brands for audiences that maybe are not like for like, if it's a male that's in building in the female space, or these things are, and like each one of them has to like wrap their heads around like the confidence and like what they bring to the table, how and when they should speak, how and when they should listen, like a lot of that stuff, like you have to work yourself through. But I think success for you guys like proves that you've been able to like figure out like that whole situation, and how to best
Uh-huh.
leverage it.
Yeah, I guess if anyone is listening on audio, address the elephant in the room. I'm not Hispanic, despite our brand really leaning into Josh's heritage. And I can say, yeah, very early on, I was pretty self-conscious of like, you know, how would this be received? To Josh's credit, like he was always like never really thinking that it was a huge issue, and like really wanted me to like get out there and tell my side of the story as well. I think from his perspective, he actually saw that my experience like brought credibility to this as well. And yeah, the longer that we've been doing this, I've definitely like become more and more confident that that is the case. You know, it's still authentic to his culture, and it hasn't really been like a hindrance to us. And to your point, like there's certain parts of the brand, right? Like anything specific to culture, I'm gonna defer to Josh as well as like the team we've now built that knows like what are the most authentic flavors. Very early on, Josh was extremely adamant that we start with Jamaica, which is hibiscus. It's an agua fresca flavor, and horchata. Those are like the two staples. If anyone's been to a taco stand, those would be like most commonly there. And early on, I told Josh my idea was like, oh, maybe we'll do like a margarita flavor or something, which we now have. And he's like, no, I think that's good. But he's like, I'm telling you, man, the nostalgia of Jamaica and horchata, these are like beverages we grew up with. We have to start there. And now that I'm saying that, that brings up another really awesome part of our brand is that yes, the category's right, but we are, for that customer base, there is a lot of nostalgia in our flavors. A lot of people grew up drinking these at family events. They are associated with good memories. Those beverages historically are very sugary and non-nutritious. So we're offering a really good alternative to those beverages, as well as just like sugary sodas and and familiar flavors. So that's been a huge advantage for us. Early on, my vision was like, hey, let's just build it around Josh's audience, which happens to be mostly Hispanic. I didn't really know at the time that we were tapping into like such a loyal demo that, to your point, it's the fastest growing in the country, and like how much power was truly behind that. So that's been an awesome part of our growth. And again, like I was a bit self-conscious in the beginning, but having gone on Josh's podcast, which now that episode has like over 100,000 views, and all along the way over the last 3 years, I've only received supportive messages, and so that's been really encouraging from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly, again, it's such a strong, cultural space to build within, and that's, coming from somebody that, like, is analyzing these spaces constantly. And it was one of those, opportunities. Again, sometimes when you see something, it just instantly, like, you just get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at least in my world, like I'm pretty, I see so many pattern sequences and things. And a lot of times, things don't really move me, or like I'm like, whatever. And I just remember the first time seeing it, and you kind of talking about it. And I instantly was like, say less. I know where you're
Mm-hmm.
going with this. Like, this is something that is so ready to happen. And again, it goes back into then, the details and in the execution, and, making sure that you're not making mistakes that you've seen in the past or whatever, which, kind of brings up, we've mentioned a few of these things, but like, I know all the time,
Mm-hmm.
things will bleed in from one to the other. And like, again, if it's good or bad, like, there's things that either are iterations from your previous, kind of roles, or if it's just direct applications, like things you're like, yeah, I really appreciated the artistic expression here, or this, that, or whatever. And I take that, and I wanted to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
I implemented it into this new, venture. Like, is there a few that just like come off the top of your head from, especially like, it could be MusclePharm, but even like some of the other,
Mm-hmm.
things that you did in that kind of interim term, that like just was like, oh, these things were just, I don't know, inspirations to stuff that you're doing now with Salude?
Yeah, well, definitely one of the biggest learnings I've gotten from both MusclePharm, where I worked at for 8 years, and then I spent about a couple of years at a company called Nutra Holdings, which many may know, Transparent Labs, or another brand, Jack Factory, which is mainly an Amazon business. I saw kind of like the downside of maybe trying to do too many things at once, or maybe more specifically at MusclePharm, that can, especially if you're just getting success in a certain area, um, trying to serve too many masters, like you touched on earlier, may not be the best strategy. One thing I look back at MusclePharm, they had a very successful protein business. If they would have maybe like expanded that into RTDs and kept really leaning into that, maybe they could be the Nutrabolt of today and still around. But instead, like, that would be like the equivalent of us just getting going here on hydration and stick packs, and then trying to go out and build like a completely separate brand, just because we've had a little bit of success at what we're doing. So that's been a huge learning, is just stay focused. I mean, it's tempting to want to go expand this into other categories, but I know that, it's not always guaranteed. And until I feel like we've really like maximized what we're doing, which we still have so much potential and runway, mainly thanks to Liquid IV paving this category, until we're in like even half of what they're doing, which we're not close to yet, we could, keep our heads down on this for a while. Other things I've learned from, I guess, from brands around us that have worked exceptionally well for us, is doing collab flavors, whether that be like, partnering with influencers or creators and giving them their own specific flavor, dropping a limited quantity. We're not reinventing the wheel there, but we're able to use Josh's network of friends who are bigger creators than himself, who are really passionate about this brand as well. And that's worked really well for us. Something that's on the list, which we've talked about a few of these, that would be really unique to Salude, is potentially doing licensing play. Obviously, it's pretty played out by pre-workout brands and protein brands. Everyone has a licensing play, but for our positioning to the Hispanic customer, there's some really unique opportunities there. And I'm hoping some of those come to fruition by next year. So again, I kind of feel like in a lot of ways, it's like, hey, we have this product market fit. I have examples of like how to do this from others in the market that have gone ahead of us. So we're not totally reinventing the wheel here. I think your famous saying is everything's a remix, and to an extent, we're doing that as well. And I guess like once we have the product, right, where we really differentiate and feel this growth is through content, and that all of my background in the industry has helped on the product side, the design side, the insights of the category. Josh has bringing in also tons of advantages in the world of content. Like, if you start a brand today, you're going to have to be producing more content than you could probably wrap your head around. Every day is demanding, and having somebody that, has done YouTube since 2010 and knows how to edit and film things cheaply, that looks like it could be like commercial worthy, that's exceptionally needed and a huge advantage. So that's been a massive key to our success. I think if anyone goes to Taste Salude Instagram or our website, you'll see like really beautiful assets that, again, like, Josh has played a huge role in bringing those to life.
I was thinking about even what you just kind of mentioned around, having the ability to leverage not only Josh's skill sets, but also his network is like this aspect of being scrappy and making sure that you are, not letting, I guess, the scrappiness or the frugality limit you, but like making sure that you realize, and this is again coming back to a MusclePharm, time frame, is like a lot of times that money was not their money, in the sense like there was investor money, and like the money was spent in such an aggressive manner that maybe you didn't put the thoughtfulness or the intention behind what you were doing a lot of times, over having to make sure that you are kind of extracting as much juice out of each scenario, and knowing, yeah, I could probably overspend on, licensing partners, or, if it's some cultural talent, like mentioned, certain, hip hop, Bad Bunny, like what, like you could go out there and probably make those connections and do it, but it's like those moves on the chessboard have to be at the right time and they have to make the most sense. And like, I think you guys making, a really thoughtful attack and a plan, and not getting ahead of yourself or trying to get outside of your means at that point is kind of super important, because you have been pretty humble, and I think kind of really, kind of leaning on like, oh, we're just this, this little supplement brand or whatever. But like, I'm lucky enough to see the syndicated data, and I know what's going on. And though a lot of your revenue is coming from outside of that world, I could tell you that like your growth rates are insane and your revenue base is quite substantial. And I think it's one of those things where like you're running a CPG business where like it's constantly needing inventory, it's constantly needing fed. That growth rate is, probably right at the point where like you're pushing the limits in terms of how far you can go with like internal profitability funding. And like you have to be, really kind of thoughtful in terms of what you're doing, and say no more than you say yes, and just make sure that you're like staying within, what's best for, again, the customer, the brand, over just like, how can we turn on revenue as fast as possible? Because if you're doing a lot of those things right, which I think, like you said, going to your social media, like you could see that like a lot of these things are being done correctly, that if you can keep reinforcing that, keep doubling down on that, all those opportunities that you're kind of putting on ice right now or saying, no to, those will come back to you whenever you're ready. And probably you'll have more leverage, to be able to deal with retailer contracts, distributor contracts, talent contracts, whatever those are. Like ultimately, if you just keep creating a stronger core, people forget that actually creates the leverage in the future. It's just that, entrepreneurs tend to get, a little bit of that, the like shiny object syndrome. It's just like, I want everything as quick as
100%.
possible, as fast as possible. And it's, instead of just looking inward and going like, how do we keep doing what we're doing better? And how do we keep, making this work in our favor? Because eventually this is where we're going to pull that leverage from when we need to.
Yeah, I don't mind, by the way, revealing some numbers, like just to put it in perspective for those listening or watching. So 2024 will be our third full year of business, and we're on pace to do around 25 million this year, which is wild to even wrap my head around. And yeah, I just try to go back to like looking at other brands that have come before us, and people probably might forget that brands like Alani Nu and Ghost, they spent several years mainly selling one hero product at one retailer, being GNC for both of them. So when I think about that, it gives me a lot of like motivation and encouragement, because we have two flavors nationwide at Target, and those guys, took them maybe like till year 4 or 5 until they were on the shelves of mainstream retail. So in a lot of ways, I think, I guess, yeah, building on that, when we got the opportunity in Target, it was like I knew that if we do this well, this is going to stamp our resume for basically doing like whatever we want at retail. Fortunately, actually, the first retailer we launched in was Walmart. So again, it's like between those two, you post good sales numbers at Walmart and Target, you're going to have some options, which is definitely now the case. Like that data that you mentioned that all can see, we're getting a lot of inbound attention, which is exciting. It's a bit overwhelming. I'm definitely trying to hone in, making sure we're not going too wide, too fast. Maybe not every retailer makes sense right this moment. Trying to really focus on like profitable partners where we think that we can really do some damage. But eventually looking at where the category's at, again, Liquid IV's shown that this product can be sold everywhere. Convenience stores, mainstream retail, club stores. I think I've seen even Liquid IV sold at Ulta Beauty stores now. Yeah, they've really done an amazing job of just creating the category, and we've been able to come in differentiated, speaking to a different customer, which has really been just like super exciting to be along for the ride.
Yeah, I think the stick pack kind of ready to mix powder hydration, or just I've kind of dubbed that the like beverage identity crisis, in the sense that like as a consumer, you have this kind of idea, and like you're trying to solve problems in your day, or you're trying to like hire these brands for jobs in your life, and you used to like think about, I think, these categories in very kind of rigid ways of like, okay, if it's a beverage, it has to be a ready to drink in a like this packaged format or whatever it was. And then over time, people have realized like, oh no, the stick packs have their own value propositions, or and we're talking energy as well, or like now I think consumers are looking at it, okay, I need a solution for hydration. Okay, I could choose this, that, or whatever, and I can have a multitude of those options available to me if I want them, in the same set of like energy or protein or whatever. And I think that that's where these, like, a lot of the power is becoming, where consumers love this, like, choose your own adventure. Like, what are you going to do today? How are you going to solve that problem? And I guess the availability of these products now, not only being in, large retail, but like even I'm seeing them show up, and I think you maybe even like in convenience stores, or like, it's not, again, even a little bit different than most people would think. You think convenience, you would only go in there and it'd have to be packaged, but why not grab a water and put in a stick pack that has, arguably a formula that maybe is a little bit better than the options that are in the coolers, or whatever it was. And or maybe you're going off and you're going somewhere where, a more portable option is going to be better for you. You're going to jump on a plane or whatever it is. Like, these serve, I think, a bunch of roles in people's lives now, that, going back to some of those earlier comments around just the shifts of the industry, is like, people now look at these products as a little bit of like nutritional insurance. Like they realize the importance of them throughout their whole life. It's not just, oh, I take this around my workout, or I take this, whatever. It's like, no, these are products that I can utilize like throughout the day, and it's going to be helpful to me regardless of what I'm doing. If it's trying to have extra energy, or extra hydration because I'm playing with my kids outside in the Texas heat, or is it something like I'm trying to go do a 5K, or am I trying, like, it doesn't matter. I think the products now fit those roles in so many different ways, where it used to be just thought of in a more rigid manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I touched on this earlier, but we really are positioning ourselves as a much healthier alternative than just even traditional soda. Or if you're sitting at your desk and you're just looking to drink more water with some flavor, it's really broad, which is great about our hero SKU. Like, you can be a young child, or you can be an elderly person and benefit from taking the product. And most people can understand it, I guess. versus maybe more non-healthy traditional options.
Like, I think of the brand in the, in the future, and I look at it and I go, success in my eyes, and again, I have no skin in the game here, but like the success in my eyes is like, can you transcend the format and the category and become, in these cultural intersections? You talk about, we talked about cultural positioning of, Hispanic or Latino market, but like also, can it be within entertainment? Can it be within these like kind of like cultural epicenters of society? And like, it's no longer thought of as like a supplement. It's no longer, it's just this brand that lives in that world that people respect and love. And like, it's entertaining, it's creating attention, it's
Mm-hmm.
doing all these things that like, kind of catapult it above just that idea of, it has to be this supplement or whatever. I always use an example, at least in our space, that probably has done the best at getting close to that, is Ghost. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they are just, breaking out into this, kind of cultural intersections of
Mm-hmm.
number of different ones that just like people know them for reasons that they have no idea that they, sold powders and what we talked about with
Mm-hmm.
GNC, and like they don't know any of that. They just know that there's this like really cool brand that they're emotionally connected to because of something, culturally significant in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And it's like, that's the ultimate goal, I think, with these like more lifestyle branding, cultural like that's where it goes. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a timeline to get there. But I think if we, put a measuring stick out 10 years, it's like, that's the goal, is like, can you move closer to that? Or can you be that? I think that's, to me at least, success. And again, don't feel like that's any pressure, because again, I have no skin in the game, but that's just,
Mm-hmm.
I could see the vision in terms of where you can get there. It's just a matter of now putting some of that stuff into play.
Absolutely, yeah. Speaking of ghosts, they've definitely been a huge inspiration for what some of what we're doing from the very beginning. I guess like to look at the broader lens of the supplement industry, it was kind of like the MusclePharm, C4, Nutrabolt era of brands that were on top. Then there was Ghost, Alani, maybe I'm sure a handful of others that came in that kind of now are leading the charge. I feel like we are well positioned to maybe be that next era of brands that's on the rise. But certainly Ghost, they definitely have made themselves just a cool brand. They do things differently. You can tell those guys really care about their branding, the content they're putting out. They're really going above and beyond on that side of the business. So we're always, we look at them often for inspiration. So hopefully, we're lucky enough we can follow even remotely in their footsteps. That would be incredible.
I kind of laid out my vision of like what's next, and it was grand and it was wide and it was definitely long term, but like
Uh-huh.
kind of look more towards, the next year or two. Like, what are the things that you're working on strategically, in the sense of like, are you doubling down? Are you trying to,
Yeah.
make sure that you're working on, expanding the core out a little bit and not getting too ahead of yourself? Or is there some big moves on the, on the playbook ahead?
Yeah, the main focus is just going to be expanding at retail. We at this time don't even have a full-time salesperson on staff. And as I said, we're now nationwide in Target, as well as going to be in around 3,000 Walmarts in November. So that all of those have been kind of coming into our lap because of the social media side of the business. That it's pretty rare to have the buyers at Target DM you asking to set up a meeting. Fortunately, because of my experience at MusclePharm, I've worked with some people that have helped us on the back end as sales advisors. Um, so the real plan now is, now that we know we're posting good data, right, at Walmart, at Target, is to really put gas on the fire. We haven't touched on this too much on the call, but we launched a second product about a year in, which is an energy line, a caffeinated line of stick packs as well. That's been doing incredibly well at retail. So we now have really two hero lines of products, that being hydration, electrolytes, and also energy. So between the two of those, there's a lot of opportunity that we can take this at retail. That's the immediate focus. There's certainly other categories that are exciting to me. We've mentioned a handful of these brands on this podcast that have eventually transitioned into RTDs. that could be something in the future, but I also know from experience how hard that category can be. And I don't want it to be something that we go into early and it eats up a bunch of cash that is going to go towards fueling the stick pack business.
Love it. Well, Tyler, I want to thank you again for the time and just, the overall conversation. It's always good to, look back a little bit to a time or some stories that maybe I forgot about and,
Hmm.
look forward. I definitely am excited to see how the next couple of years of Salude work out.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on. I can say this podcast is a lot of the people you have on here, I've learned a lot from other brands, brand owners. So thanks for all of the stuff you're doing for the space and the industry.
But I hope you enjoyed the first principles thinking that went into my latest YouTube video. If you did, can you do me a favor by hitting that like button? That quick and free action helps YouTube know my content is worth spreading to more people. Also, we're getting really close to reaching my next subscriber goal, and it would be great if you join me on this journey. But to do that, we need to fix the fact that slightly more than three-fourths of you that are watching this video right now are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and that hurts my feelings. Regardless, I want to thank you for giving me some of your attention and time, and I'll see you on the next one.